which there aren't, excuse me, many of. You might notice I'm not in my normal, environment. I'm away visiting family for the week of the 4th, so I'm in my childhood bedroom. Uh, and not only that, I am partially sick. So I'm going to try to get through this. It's been a busy weekend, a busy Monday, but I'm going to try to kind of get through, see if we can, have an interesting conversation here. If you haven't already, please like the live stream. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It really, really does help. If you're watching this after the fact, super happy to have you as well. Please just, again, also, like the video, subscribe if you haven't. Time code should be in the description by the time you're watching this. We stream every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Like I said, because I'm, doing this from my parents' house. The internet is not as great as normally this would be. So if there's any issues, please just drop it in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it. Like, I know I'm kind of like glitching around right now, but hopefully you can at least hear me. That's what I'm hoping. Okay, why don't we get started looking at the box office from this past weekend. Total box office was 153 million for the weekend domestically. Only a 1% drop. I think technically it was 0.5% drop. So this is what every movie studio was hoping for with this summer season. Because as we all know, the box office for the whole year has been very, very slow. There have been a few big hits, but none of them have been super, super big mega hits the way Hollywood was used to, like 10 or even 5 years ago. So it's really reassuring to see a $153 million weekend coming off of an equally large weekend. So looking at what opened, we have at number 2, A Quiet Place, day 1 at 53 million for its opening weekend. I had projected this to be 36 to 41 million. So this definitely exceeded my expectations. The projections. Maybe I should just listen to other people instead of trying to make up my own projections. This was made off of a $67 million budget. And so far it's made about 99 million worldwide. So it's definitely, it's kind of gotten a good start, holds in the coming weeks and weekends, I should say. But this seems to be on par with the other Quiet Place films, which also opened in like the high 40s, low 50s. So, again, not a huge blockbuster success by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely something that, shows that there's still some vitality to the Quiet Place brand. Also opening this week at number 3, we have the first chapter of Kevin Costner's epic Western saga, Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1, only bringing in about 11 million, which is definitely disappointing if you're Kevin Costner. I had projected it at bringing in about 15 to 19 million, so this definitely didn't even, and that was already a low bar, right? For a film like this, it's like a $50 to $100 million budget. You want to see it make some pretty big numbers in that first weekend. I've also heard it's not that great, right? So I don't even think this is going to be an example of it, doing kind of okay at the start and then kind of holding out for a long time. I would be shocked if this is still in the top 5 next weekend. If not, no, I don't want to say it's not going to be in the top 10, but there's a good chance that it just doesn't last. But maybe it will, though, because it'll be like 4th of July weekend, and this is like a dad movie. This is like the epitome of like a movie that middle-aged men are gonna go because they like Kevin Costner and they like westerns, and they'll just go and then they'll like it fine. So that's definitely disappointing if you're Kevin Costner or anyone who's associated with this. I believe he like self-financed this, so this isn't just like, oh, it kind of sucks for Kevin Costner because he's like the star. Like, he is the director, like he financed the whole thing, so a little disappointing. It's also especially interesting in the top 10 this week. We have like 2 Bollywood movies. So at number 5 we have Kalki 2898 AD, bringing in 5.5 million. This had a pretty big budget of like 72 million, but it was like hugely successful in India. I wasn't able to get like the exact numbers, but I believe it set like all these box office records in India. So that's interesting that I was able to crack the top 10 here in the United States. Also, it looks like there's a film, number 9, Jet and Juliet 3. So I think it's, the third in a trilogy, bringing in about 1.5 million. So again, it's interesting to see what ends up kind of just squeaking in. And of course, I don't think these will stay in for much longer after this first week. Looking at stuff continuing here, we have Inside Out 2 holding on to its number one spot, bringing in $57 million. It's held its first place spot in its third weekend, only having a 43% drop. So again, definitely good to see if you, basically you ideally you always want to see less than 50% drop weekend to weekend. You're always gonna have like a huge drop from the first to second. And this one, if my memory is correct, did not have a huge drop. And then this is also, I think it's about 100, went down to 100, and now it's down to about 50-60 million for the weekend. This brings its domestic total up to 469 million, and worldwide, the first movie in 2024 to do that, for worldwide gross $1.01 billion. So just barely squeaking past $1 billion. So this has been an unmitigated success for Pixar and Disney. I've talked about this at length on this show, but it's going to be disappointing because Hollywood always takes the wrong lessons from every success and every failure. So what is the lesson going to be here? Forget more interesting, personal, unique, and original ideas. We're just going to lean on what's worked in the past. But financially had it had a $200 million budget. So it's not only made back its budget, but it's again been very lucrative. And again, it's only been in theaters for 3 weeks. So, really 2 weeks, 3 weekends. So, the sky's the limit on this could keep growing and growing and growing. Also continuing, we have, at number 6, The Bike Riders in its second weekend now. Bringing in just a small 3.3 million. We're talking about having a big drop. It didn't really even open that big to begin with. It was kind of fell below projections. This has now had a 66% drop. I've heard it's good, but not great. And for a film like this, that's more of on the indie side, you need it to be great for people to really care about it. This brings its total to domestically to about 16 million, and its worldwide total to about 24 million. But this is all off of a $30-40 million budget. So this is going to be concerning in terms of being able to make back its money. I think I remembered it was originally going to be released by 20th Century Studios, 20th Century Searchlight, whatever it's called now, Searchlight Pictures. Basically the independent arm of 20th Century Fox that was, subsumed by Disney when they bought it. And I think they ditched it. And I remember that was a big story at the time, and then it got picked up by a different distributor. But maybe Disney saw something, or they were able to read the tea leaves in a sense. Also in its second weekend here, we have in the top 10, it kind of just actually making it into the top 10, is Kinds of Kindness, which is the Yorgos Lanthimos film. He's the director of Killing of a Sacred Deer, and Poor Things, and The Favorite, and The Lobster, all these incredible, really quirky, off the beaten path kind of movies. This opened last weekend, but it went from being in 5 theaters to 490 theaters, so this was a 298% jump. So it actually jumped from 13th place to now just barely squeaking into the top 10. But again, this is not a movie that is expected to make a lot of money, and I feel like the marketing for this has been piss poor, especially since Poor Things swept a lot of the categories at the Oscars. So far, it's only made about $2 million domestically and $3 million worldwide off of just a $15 million budget, right? So it's, again, films like this aren't meant to be huge money makers, but you want to at least make back your budget, right? I don't know. Also continuing, we have, still in the top 5, Bad Boys Ride or Die, the 4th Bad Boys film, fittingly at number 4, bringing in about 10 million for the weekend. It dropped from 2nd to 4th place, now in its 4th frame, so it's been in theaters for about a month now. Only a 45% drop, so this is another one that's been fairly successful, all things considered. This brings its domestic total to about 165 million and 332 million worldwide, off of just a $100 million budget. So it's definitely made back its budget. This has definitely been a not a huge gangbusters box office victory by any stretch of the imagination, but this, again, is, I think, a much more sustainable goal for movie studios, or films that just consistently do pretty more than their budget. There is a sizable $100 million worth of profit, Also continuing, just want to make a note here. We have at number 7 and number 8, two films that have been in the top 10 for way over a month, and one of them even basically about 2 months. Number 7, we have the Garfield movie, still in the top 10, and number 7, 2 million for the weekend, dropping from 5th to 7th in its 6th frame. Again, only about a 47% drop. And off of just a $60 million budget, it's now brought in $90 million domestically, $240 million worldwide. So the worldwide gross is basically 4 times its budget. Is Hollywood going to take the wrong lessons? Probably. And the lesson's going to be, we should make more animated films based off of iconic cartoon properties. And then at number 8, we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, still in the top 10, bringing just a very humble 1.7 million. Huge drop, though, in terms of the ranking. It dropped from 4th to 8th. But in its 8th frame, so the fact that it was in the top 5 for so long, I think is commendable. A slightly bigger drop, but again, this makes sense. It's so far into its run at this point, by modern standards at least. That's not super surprising or super alarming. This brings its total domestically to 168 million, and its worldwide total to 389 million off of just a $160 million budget. So again, this has definitely been an interesting summer box office season. A lot of movies that we thought would do really well kind of flounder. Films that, and there's all these other films that we thought would do well, and then they did well, right? They're not, again, these huge, like, once in a generation box office phenomenons, but these are consistent money makers. Hopefully one of the right lessons studios can take is, to be okay with a film slowly building its box office returns. Quickly, just want to not even plug, but just note, we have a couple films that were in the top 10 that have now dropped out. We have this week at number 11, If, the John Krasinski Imaginary Friends movie. It dropped from 6th place to 11th place, and it spent 6 weeks in the top 10. The other 2 movies I'm going to mention were only in the top 10 for 1 week. That was Thelma, which is now at number 12. It dropped from 8th. And then The Exorcism, which dropped from 7th place to now 18th place. Again, they only spent 1 week in the top 10, which makes a lot of sense considering that, they're smaller. Thelma is small, and The Exorcism is just, from what I hear, not very good. Looking at the comments here, Vivian Metzger writes, I definitely want to see A Quiet Place 3. I loved the first 2, just such amazing sound design. Yeah, that's like one of the best things about those movies is like the fact that because of the conceit, you really have to lean on like visual storytelling. Though not to but this is technically like a prequel. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is interesting because, again, it's not following any of the characters we know. I think that there's like a few characters that show up that we're familiar with, but again, it's more like side characters. But notably, like the original films are post-apocalyptic. This film is apocalyptic, right? It's covering the beginning of this. And there's like a different kind of way that the characters within the story are going to react to that, right? Because like they're learning the rules, whereas like John Krasinski and Emily Blunt and their family, like they already know the rules, right? So I'm curious I was very surprised to see it do so well and kind of match those original films. But it'll be interesting to see. I've heard like it's fine. So it'll be interesting to see if, people find it interesting and worth going to see. Okay, I just want to give a quick plug before we move on. So Cinema QSO is not just a YouTube channel. It has started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I write more formal written reviews of new movies coming out. Just wanted to plug the review, like the newest review I just have up for Inside Out 2. If you know anything about me, you know that the original Inside Out frustrates me and annoys me more than anything. I think it's a net positive movie. And Inside Out 2 is everything about the original but double down. So if you really liked the original, you're going to love this one. But if you're like me, this one was really annoying. Definitely go check out that review. You can find the link to the Substack newsletter in the description below, or you can just go to your browser, type in cinemanqso.substack.com. Okay, let me just grab a quick drink here. Okay. So let's talk about story number 1. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because Like, I'm going to try not to just talk about this wholesale and talk about this just as if I'm a political commentator talking about this story. I'm going to try to focus in on this story in the ways that it pertains to media. Because as you know, I talk about stories related to film, media, and entertainment, right? And I really want to take it from that angle. So if you've been unless you've been living under a rock, you know that we just had our the first debate of the 2024 presidential election. I guess not the first debate because we had like the Republican primary, but like for the general election. This debate was held last Thursday in Atlanta. It was hosted by CNN, notably as opposed to the Commission on Presidential Debates. Usually a nonpartisan, non-media organization organizes the debates, but I guess neither the Biden team or the Trump team liked the format, the rules or whatever, so CNN stepped up to host this. It was moderated by CNN's own Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. They notably were very neutral, very little fact-checking, if at all. It's come out later, and this came out after I wrote my notes for this, but I think it has now come out that like part of the rules, which were not disclosed to the public until like it came out, was that like I think the Trump team requested that there would be no fact-checking from the moderators, which you feel like would be like an important rule to like make clear. And I think the only reason why they revealed this is because everyone was just like shitting on CNN and particularly Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. So I think they were just kind of like, look, here's why we didn't do anything, right? But the debate brought in about 51.3 million viewers across 16 networks. So even though it was a CNN hosted debate, it did play on other channels. But notably, this was like the first debate because it was like being hosted by a network. There was ad time, which is rare. I mean, not rare, like it never happens. But I think if you were watching on like Fox or NBC, like it would just go to like black or like a still image during the ad breaks. So 51.3 million viewers, that's a lot of people. I would love to have even 1% of those people watch this show, right? But this is a 30% drop from 2020's first debate. So, you know, it's obviously, as with every televised event, the metrics are always going down because TV is just like in a slow decline. But that being said, though, when you look at it from that standpoint, it's a disappointment. But when you look at it from within CNN's programming, from what I understand, this is the highest rated program in CNN's history. So this was definitely successful for them in terms of, again, not only bringing this, but then again having that opportunity to show ads, right? Because that's a captive audience that's hard. That is a big audience to get in the United States to watch the same thing all at the same time, right? So looking at like presidential debates, because I think I want to kind of set the table here, kind of give some context about the origin of presidential debates, why they were important, why they still are important, and then kind of look at this debate that happened. It makes it sound like it was like a tragedy, which it kind of was. Kind of look at through that lens, right? So presidential debates have been held sporadically throughout American history. Like the most famous pre-television debates were like the Lincoln-Douglas debates, right, between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. But that was like in the 19th century. The 1960 presidential election between JFK and Richard Nixon, when he ran for president the first time, that brought the debate onto TV, which was still like a fairly new medium. And this proved wildly important and influential because it changed the perception of the candidates, or rather reinforced perceptions, right? So there's like famous stories. If you ever, if you're like an American history class, like this is like a tidbit history teachers love to throw out. And it is interesting, but I feel like it's just, I've heard it from like every history person ever, right? The debate was not only on TV, but it was over the radio. People that listened to it on the radio felt like Nixon won the debate, but anyone who watched it believed that JFK, won it easily, just because of the optics and the perception. Kennedy seemed very cool, very poised, whereas Nixon seemed like nervous and kind of stuffy. He was sweating. He looked uncomfortable. And from that moment, they weren't always held every election year, but I think starting in like 1976, they've done it every election cycle. And these televised debates became immensely important. It's not usually the thing that makes or breaks a campaign, but it's definitely something that can have a huge downstream effect, right? Televised debates give the candidates the chance to change the narrative for better or for worse, right? And usually most people watching, because people always like lament, like, oh, the debates, oh, like there's no good debates anymore, they're just young, blah 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 blah. That's all true, but these televised debates, except maybe like the first couple, it was never about policy, right? Because if you really just wanted to find out about their policy, you could just like go on their website. It's really more about performance, about projecting your personality and your style of leadership, and how is that going to translate into the office of the president, right? So the lead up to this debate was interesting because nobody was looking forward to this. So I think like poll after poll has shown that like the majority of Americans are not happy that we're having a rematch between two of the most unpopular candidates in like recent history, right? Especially thinking back to what the debates between Biden and Trump were like in 2020, where it was mostly bickering rather than like a meaningful debate, even by like American televised debate standards. Like it wasn't even a good showcase for their performance. It was really just like talking over each other. And to be completely clear, I'm not trying to both sides this. It was really Trump talking over Biden and all this stuff, and no one liked it, right? It was just not useful or helpful on any level, policy or performance. And it just created like this toxic kind of feeling about the whole thing. So CNN just, was going to host this now, and they have their own rules. In addition to the rule about not fact-checking, which again didn't come out till later, it was heavily publicized that some of the rules in place for this debate would be there would be no audience, and most importantly, muted microphones, right? And that's never been something that has needed to have been there, because most presidential candidates, the conventional wisdom was like you have to be respectful and like seem presidential by like listening politely to your opponent speak, but call him out when he's saying something you disagree with. But Trump, as with almost everything that he touched, Trump completely blew up the whole system. So the Biden team was like, we're not going to do this unless you guys mute the microphone unless it's supposed to be the person talking, like they've been asked a question and they're giving their answer. But both sides agreed to all the terms, and that led up to this debate, right? So the results of the debate. So this is probably going to go down, and maybe this is hyperbolic, but everyone's being hyperbolic. So I am just reporting the hyperbole to you. This might go down as one of the worst debate performances since we've been televising these. Biden was hoarse and he was frail. He seemed incoherent at times, jumping around to different topics, like kind of starting to answer one thing and then kind of switching gears, but not like in a I'm going to intentionally and strategically pivot. More just like it just seemed like he kind of forgot what he was talking about. And I even noticed as soon as he walked out, before he had even said anything, I went, oh no. Because, and I'll touch more on this later, but it basically, everything about this debate confirmed everyone's worst fears about a Joe Biden campaign in 2024. Not only did it confirm those fears, it introduced new fears. It was even worse than I think even the people with the lowest expectations thought it would be. It was even worse than that. Trump, on the other hand, he delivered his usual strengths, if you want to call them that, his usual strengths, but also found some new ones, right? So, of course, he's a pathological liar, right? He's like, almost everything he said that was like a fact was just a lie, or a misunderstanding of the facts, or an intentional misrepresentation of the facts. At one point, Biden even said, a very Biden thing to say. He said, quote, every single thing he said is a lie. I've never heard so much malarkey in my whole life, end quote. So that's always that. So that Trump, was very typical in that sense, right? But notably, he was very cogent and sharp. A lot of what he was saying also didn't make sense, and he also deflected a lot of questions. But again, unlike Biden, he seemed more intentional rather than confused. If he started to go off topic, it was because he wanted to change the conversation, not because he just didn't know what was going on. Whether or not that's true or not, again, because people have said that Trump is also in some cognitive decline, because they're not that much difference in age, but it doesn't matter, right? So again, I'm going to get maybe I should say this at the start. So kind of put my biases out there, right? I am pretty far left. So like even Joe Biden is like a little too conservative for me, right? So, but I'm trying to look at this just purely as like a political strategist. If you're watching this, and you don't speak English, so you're just hearing them and seeing them, you don't know what they're saying, right? Trump seemed like he actually had everything going on, whereas Biden seemed like an old man who was frail and forgetful, right? And it doesn't matter. And they've tried to spin and go, oh, well, sometimes he's really, what's the word? Like, what's the word? Vitality. He has a lot of vitality. And then other parts of the day he won't. And it's like, okay, but you're the president of the United States. You need to be on your A game 24/7. So that's not really a good excuse. Going back to Trump for a second, and so he was basically typical Trump. But the rules of the muted mic actually helped him, right? Because again, the biggest issue most people had with the previous debates was the bickering, the talking over one another. The muted mic forced him to restrain himself and not be what his team reportedly told him not to be, a raging asshole, quote unquote, right? So not only did Trump, he was sharp and he was attacking, but he was like relentless. He also pulled back on some of the things that people don't like about him, in terms of like the seeming like an asshole. Now, of course, he was still a pathological liar, but that's not as easy to see or get the impression of. You would need to then like find out the facts. But again, for an American public that cares a lot about performance in these debates, this was a huge, I wouldn't even say a win for Trump, but a big, big lose for Biden, right? And there's also these like surreal statements, like the fact in a presidential debate. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised at this point because American politics has been completely imploded or kind of completely transformed because of Trump over the past decade. But it's still weird to hear in a presidential debate Trump saying something like, quote, I didn't have sex with a porn star, end quote. And then Biden saying something like, quote, you have the morals of an alley cat, end quote. And then by the end they were arguing about their golf game. It was just it seemed like they were more invested in the golf game trash talk more than anything else. So it was just a very bizarre experience, right? Now, what has the reaction been? So one of the reactions has been panic. Complete panic in the Democratic Party, right? People have been concerned about Joe Biden's age since 2020, since 2019 when he was running the first time. And there was a pretty strong suggestion or signal that he had been signaling to his team and to the press that he would be a transitional candidate, that he was running this one time to defeat Trump, and then he would very explicitly announce he was not going to be running again to pass the torch on to the next generation, right? But of course that didn't happen. Why that didn't happen, we don't know. Maybe we misinterpreted those signals, or the people that were really close to him that were getting those signals, they misinterpreted them. That could be an option. Another option could be that he assumed Trump would go quietly into that good night and he could then pass the torch. But then when Trump, made it clear that he was going to run again, Joe Biden maybe felt like I have to run again. Or maybe he just likes being president of the United States, a job he has been, running for decades. And maybe he just doesn't want to leave. Maybe he just wants to be president. So, but people have been saying this for years, that he's too old for, if not for the last campaign, then definitely for this one. There have been a few people that have been brave enough to say, basically say the emperor has no clothes. But most of the liberal media has, and it makes it sound like I'm like super conservative. Again, I'm on the other extreme of it. But the mainstream media has kind of rallied around the talking points of, okay, yeah, Biden has these problems, but Trump is worse. And only a few people have been like, no, this is like an electoral issue. This is going to be a major issue. So anyone who's been intellectually honest should not have been surprised by this debate, right? And again, like I said, the debate only worsened these concerns, right? The Biden team wanted this debate to reset the narrative. There had been, Trump had been really, reaching Joe Biden in the polls, sometimes even beating him in certain polls, especially in certain swing states, mainly because of his age. So it seemed like the Biden team really wanted this debate to reset the narrative. They spent, the Biden team spent a week at Camp David practicing. And the whole strategy has completely backfired, right? Because again, like I said, not only were people's concerns validated, things are even worse than we thought. And that's me. Like, I was probably one of the biggest Biden doomers out there. And even, again, the bar was so low and it was still not met. It was still a disappointment. And this isn't, again, just me talking because I'm crazy, left wing or whatever. And it's not just super conservative people. So this, again, it was hosted by CNN, and they had a panel before, and then they had the panel after. Afterwards, the CNN panel, presumably the friendly left-wing network, most of the people on the panel immediately started calling for Biden to drop out. You have John King, who's been at CNN forever, saying, quote, "It was a game-changing debate in the sense that right now, as we speak, there is a deep, a wide, and a very aggressive panic in the Democratic Party," end quote. And at the bottom, the little chyron, like the scrolling words, at one point it said, "Sources, Dems saying we have a problem after Biden's performance tonight," end quote. So I think a lot of Democrats had been kind of holding their tongue and consolidating support around Biden. I don't think anyone besides those closest to the Biden team really thought this was ever going to be a good idea, but they didn't want to step on toes of the party and then become a pariah within the party and be like the one who, is speaking out and kind of showing disunity. But now I think everyone, I don't think you go from complete support to complete, this guy needs to go over and over one debate. I think these are things everyone that is saying this, they were already thinking this. They were just waiting for the green light. They were just waiting for the moment where it would be appropriate and they wouldn't have to risk too much politically to say this, right? And again, it's not just the Democrats who are just self-interested because they want their party to win. You have Sarah Longwell, who's the head of the Republicans Against Trump organization, and she said, quote, "I want Trump to lose more than anything in the world, but this is an unmitigated disaster. This was a crucial night for Biden. He did not show up. You can't deny what people saw with their eyes. A man who is too old to be president. He was up against a lunatic, a liar, and a man who is clearly unfit, but Trump is going to win unless we do something drastic. We can't pretend that we didn't see what we just saw," end quote. And again, perception in this arena is huge, right? It is super, super important. And ultimately, it's not an ageism thing. It's not his age. It's just that because he's old, you're more likely to not be super mentally competent anymore, right? It's not an age thing because there are plenty of people older than Biden that probably would be more with it, quote unquote, than he would be. So it's not an age thing. It's just Joe Biden specifically is just not fit anymore. Not that Trump is fit. Again, I'm not putting this into this binary, it's either this or that, because I think politics is and should be on a spectrum. So to criticize Biden, and a lot of people are like, "So that mean you like Trump?" Absolutely not. But it's just, again, this, Sarah Longwell says, we can't pretend that we didn't see what we just saw. It is really like the emperor has no clothes. And people trying to do damage control. So that happened almost immediately after the debate. And even during the debate, the team, an hour in after, the damage had already been done, the team being like, "Oh, Joe Biden has a cold tonight. That's why he's not doing very well." Which, even if that's true, again, a cold should not make you incomprehensible. So if that's what he's like when he gets a cold, that's concerning. If anything, that's almost worse. But we have a quote here from senior political strategist Eric Schultz, writing in The Hollywood Reporter, saying, quote, "Very few voters will have this June debate in front of mind when casting their ballot," end quote. And I think that's a good point. That is still, this is a particularly early debate. Historically, usually that they're in the fall, right before the election, maybe September or in October. There's a few. So this is a little bit far out. It's still 5 months away, but or 4 months away. But this again, this has changed the narrative. So while this debate might not be the thing that makes people not vote for Joe Biden, this could again be the first in like a chain reaction, like I said, of dominoes, right? There could be a major downstream impact, even if people aren't consciously at the top of their minds thinking about this debate. Of course, President Obama has come out of the woodwork. I feel like the only time he ever comes out is to support Joe Biden, especially in 2020 when it looked like Bernie Sanders was going to win. So he basically coordinated with all the other nominees to drop out and throw their support behind Biden. So we have this quote from Obama saying, quote, bad debate nights happen. Trust me, I know. He's referring there to his debate in 2012, against his first debate against Mitt Romney. Trust me, I know. But this election is still a choice between someone who has fought for ordinary folks his entire life and someone who only cares about himself. Between someone who tells the truth, who knows right from wrong and will give it to the American people straight, and someone who lies through his teeth for his own benefit. Last night didn't change that, and it's why so much is at stake in November, end quote. And respectfully, Mr. Obama, President Obama, I disagree. Because, again, I'm not saying if you don't vote for Biden, then like, oh, you should then vote for Trump. Because I'm probably going to vote for a third party. But, like, he was seen as a really great debater, and then they had this hiccup, and then kind of came back to it. But Biden's poor performance confirms everyone's worst fears, right? It makes it very clear what we've all been thinking for a long time. Immediately after this, Kamala Harris is going on CNN saying, it was a slow start, but a strong finish. Gavin Newsom, who is often identified as like someone that could replace Biden on the ticket, has said that Democrats should, quote, worry less and do more, end quote. And a lot of criticism has been flung at the moderators, right? Blaming Tapper and Bash for Trump essentially walking all over Biden. We have a quote here from Daniel Daddario at Variety magazine saying, quote, Tapper and Bash's questions were unshapely, inelegant, not intended to draw anything more than conflict, end quote. But again, not sure Biden would have done much better if other people were doing the fact-checking work for him, because it's kind of like they need to step in and save the campaign and save his chances. Like that shouldn't be their job. That should be Joe Biden's job. So the reason why I've talked about this, I think I've kind of made all my political points clear, but kind of tying all this up, it shows that televised debates still matter. I think after 2016 and then especially 2020, the idea of like the debate, the presidential debate, seemed like a relic of a different political era that was now over. A pre-Trump political era. It really only works if both candidates commit to the bit, in a sense, and respect the format and actually try to engage in some way. But I think I was wrong because, I don't know if this was a good debate, but it clearly shows that it still has influence. Again, because it has completely changed the narrative. I'm not sure perception of Trump has changed, but I think Biden failed to meet, like I said, even the lowest of expectations. And I think this is something someone on CNN had said during this panel, is I don't think Trump got a lot of new support for this, but I think a lot of swing voters, in these key states are maybe now going to not vote for him and vote for a third party or just sit out the election. And that is where the pain is going to be for the Biden campaign. So in any case, supposedly there's going to be another debate. I think if I was part of Trump's team, I would insist on not doing it because you don't want to change the narrative again. You want the narrative to just be this for 4 months. But it's just definitely just a really awful situation that this is like the two choices that we have. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 2. So Microsoft has revealed that Xbox Cloud Gaming is going to be coming to Fire TV. This is only going to be on some select devices, including the Fire TV 4K Max, which is about $60, and the Fire TV Stick 4K, which is about $50. Surely it will expand if this proves to be popular and successful. But the idea is that it's now going to give Fire TV users access to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So if you're not aware what that is, Game Pass has always been billed as Netflix, but for games, right? This idea that you could stream for a subscription fee a month or you pay yearly or whatever, you get access to all these games. You don't buy them, you don't own them, but you have access to this huge library of games to stream, right? And I believe the Ultimate level, so Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, is like the higher tier. And when you have that, you're able to not only use it on your Xbox, but you're able to use it wherever like the Xbox Cloud Gaming app is. So like you could use it on your PC. And now it's going to be on Fire TVs, right? So we have this quote here from Fire TV and Alexa Vice President Daniel Rausch saying, quote, "We're excited to work with Microsoft to bring the Xbox app to select Fire TV devices so customers can enjoy a vast library of high-quality games, allowing them to play amazing titles without the need for a console. Now, customers have even more ways to play the games they love, wherever they are, with just a compatible Fire TV stick, Bluetooth controller, and Game Pass Ultimate membership," end quote. The Verge notes that, again, the Game Pass app, the cloud gaming app, has appeared elsewhere. So notably, it's been on like Samsung TVs and monitors, and it was also launched on Meta's Quest VR headset. But again, Fire TV, Amazon Fire TVs are super, super popular. I feel like in certain ways it might be like the default smart TV for a lot of people. So a collaboration like this makes sense, right? So again, it might seem like Xbox and Fire TV are unlikely partners, but Microsoft and Amazon, however, are two of the biggest tech companies, kind of from like the same generation of tech companies, give or take. So they do kind of fit together, and this collaboration makes sense. Not only that, but Prime Video just released their Fallout streaming show, which is based off of the video game franchise, which Microsoft now owns, because it was made by Bethesda, and Microsoft now owns the Bethesda, the video game publisher, right? So I found this story really, really interesting because it further expands Xbox's reach as a new kind of console, quote unquote. I've done lots of videos about Xbox and the future of Xbox. I think it was literally like a week or two ago, I talked about why there should be a handheld Xbox. I think that's the future for Xbox. But this is another potential future, and I think it's equally plausible. This idea that Xbox is not just a publisher of games, but Xbox is also not just a console manufacturer. It is this third other new thing. I guess you could compare it to like how Steam is not quite a console, but it's an ecosystem. I think Xbox is trying to achieve something like that. We have a quote here from Xbox Experiences and Platforms Engineering Corporate Vice President Ashley McKissick. I wonder how small the font has to be on her business card to have all that on there. She said, quote, "The expansion of Xbox gaming to Fire TV devices offers players another option for enjoying their favorite games using devices they already own. For those who don't own an Xbox console, this provides an affordable and convenient way to get started. With Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, there's something for every type of player. We look forward to having more people join the Xbox gaming community," end quote. So again, it just reinforces how physical consoles are becoming less and less important. They're still going to always have a role, kind of like with like physical media, like film people prefer to watch a movie on the Blu-ray because it's always going to be better quality than like trying to stream it. But streaming is just more convenient for casual consumers. So it makes sense that gaming would really start to move further and further into that realm. The big question is going to be, is cloud gaming really feasible to replace physical gaming? Because, not everyone has a strong internet, right? And that's already an issue with streaming in general. But then streaming a game is way different than streaming a movie or a TV show or a song. Because with a game, it's something that's being rendered in real time. It's not like this static file that's just like, here's the beginning, here's the end. Like a video file would be, right? Where like the stream, they have little tricks where they can kind of buffer part of it so you can start watching it while it's buffering the rest of the video, right? A game isn't like that. So that's going to be the big issue for any real push into cloud gaming. But I think this is just immensely interesting. Again, that if you have that controller, or really any controller, you can now forego, like if you don't care about having the best Xbox experience, you can now get the Xbox experience just on your Fire TV, which frankly sounds awful though, all of this being said, because Fire TV, their operating system sucks ass. So it's like, I can't imagine how, functional this app is going to be. But if they can get this to work, this would, I think, be a huge game changer. Or rather, not a huge game changer, but a piece of a larger capital G game changer of just kind of reflecting a sea change in the industry. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. I also want to apologize. I think we were kind of dipping in and out, again, because the internet isn't super, super great. So I do apologize, but there's literally nothing I can do about it. So, you're going to have to, you get what you get, and you don't get upset. Okay, let's talk about story number 3. So IATSE, or IATSE, the union, and I'll explain what that is in a moment for those of you who don't know. IATSE has reached a tentative agreement with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, or the AMPTP. They've reached a tentative agreement on a 3-year contract. So this is going to cover 13 West Coast locals, which represents about 50,000 union members. The terms of this tentative deal are going to be for a wage increase, so 7% in the first year, 4% in the second year, and 3.5% in the third year. Another term is there's going to be additional penalties for long work days, in addition to tripled hourly wages when a workday exceeds 15 hours, which can happen in the film industry. There are some protections against AI, which includes, quote, language that ensures no employee is required to provide AI prompts in any manner that would result in the displacement of any covered employee, end quote. And then also looking towards streaming residuals. And those residuals will provide about $670 million to help fund the union's health and pension plans. So if you don't know, so IATSE is an acronym standing for the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. So as based off the title, you can probably guess it started as a theater-based union for like the crew, but now it also covers what's called below the line crew members on film production. So below the line, it's kind of derogatory. We really should get rid of it, but the idea is that there's like a certain line on a call sheet for a film production, like a big thick black line, and everyone above the line are like all like the quote unquote important people, like the main producers and the director and like the DP and the actors, and then everyone below the line are like the grips and the electricians and the caterers and the basically everything else. So they're part of this union. And I have been hearing about these negotiations for quite some time, and I've been avoiding talking about it on this show just because it seemed like I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And this seems to be, assuming it gets ratified by the union members, seems to be where it was all culminating. Because the lead up is, we're still feeling the fallout from the previous dual strikes from last year, right? In both sides of this negotiation, we're really feeling the pain, right? Because many of these workers, these below the line workers, they were not on strike, but because production was shut down, they weren't getting any work, right? And obviously it was a struggle for those who were actually on strike, but at least those people had a lot of public attention, and they had like a strike fund to dip into. These workers were just out of a job, right? So they definitely wanted to find a solution where production could get up and running, and so we could avert another strike. And then on the other side, those studios were also still reeling from the film shortage due to the strikes. We have a year of films that, we just had Inside Out 2 cross $1 billion, the first film of the year to do so, right? There have been some big movies, but a lot of movies had to get pushed back or retooled or sometimes canceled. So, the studios are definitely don't want there to be another shutdown and another pause. They want to just get stuff. They just need to put stuff in the theaters, right? But this was not necessarily going to be a slam dunk because of all of that, right? Because they began negotiations like early March, so it's taken about 4 months to iron out some of these details. Now that the deal is more or less in place, now it just needs to be ratified. I think it's just a huge sigh of relief for both sides, right? Because again, everyone needs to get back to work, and Variety notes that, many of the union members, they're cautiously optimistic. I think they were excited after the last couple strikes ended, and then they realized like production didn't come back as quickly as they had hoped. So I think they're tentatively, hesitantly happy and hopeful. But only time will tell to see, because as I think I've talked about in this show before, film productions in LA have decreased. And not just because of the strikes, just because it's getting expensive and productions are going elsewhere around the country, around the globe. But that being said, though, there was the labor unions did have some leverage here because of the successes of the other strikes. So, I think there was a sense of like we shouldn't settle. So I'm really happy to see that they basically, have gotten, if not everything they wanted, they at least have gotten something towards everything that they've wanted. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. So let's talk about story number 4. So this was like a developing story that was kind of one story, and then it grew and got even worse. So Deadline last week, like on Tuesday, exclusively reported that Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment was in dire financial circumstances. Employees hadn't been paid in a week at this point. They had gotten, Deadline had spoken with a senior executive, and they said, we don't know who it was, so off the record, but they said, quote, initially they said checks would go out Tuesday at the latest, and now here we are, end quote. And not only that, medical benefits had been suspended, which again really sucks. You forget, like, people in the entertainment industry, like, they are just people and they have jobs, and it would suck if you were at your job and you have health insurance through your company, and then one day they just decide, actually, you know what, we're pausing this for right now. They sent a company-wide email out saying, quote, we recommend all elective, non-urgent, and routine medical appointments to be rescheduled until we can provide your medical providers the details of how to process claims. Please use your best judgment on whether or not you can reschedule any of your appointments, end quote. So basically they were like, we don't really have the money to pay for this, so like only use it if you really, really need it. After this Deadline article came out, the next day, on Wednesday, the CEO, Bill Ruhana, emailed the employees. And this is a quote from Deadline kind of describing that email. So the Deadline article said, quote, acknowledging that the limbo state has caused incredible frustration and anxiety, he said he and the members of the management team have been working nonstop to close a financing arrangement that will allow cash to resume flowing. They hope, quote unquote, to fund the delinquent payroll by Monday, Ruhana said, promising an update by Friday with benefits, quote unquote, expected to be reinstated in 2 weeks, end quote. Furthermore, Redbox Senior Vice President Jeff Joppa tried to reassure his division on Friday, sending out a memo saying, quote, our company is in a very painful period of transition. We're temporarily stuck in the moment of pain and uncertainty. It's scary. It feels unfair. If you're running out of hope, it is understandable. If you're frustrated or angry, I get it. We are expecting resolution in the coming days while not fully knowing what that looks like, end quote. So a lot of this is like, it's easy to say this when you're like up in like the upper management, like at a corporate level, because it's like, oh, this is frustrating for you, but like, it's not really helpful when someone isn't getting paid and they don't have their health insurance anymore to be like, this is frustrating. We get it. Like, it feels like it's almost like worse that you said something, because it then shows, okay, so you are where you need to say something, but you're choosing to say this. So like, what's the background with all this? I'm talking about Chicken Soup for the Soul, and I'm talking about Redbox. What does any of this have to do with each other? So Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, as a company, spun off from the self-help publishing brand, right? The Chicken Soup for the Soul books. This entertainment company spun off in 2017, and the idea is that it grew over time through acquisitions of different media companies. So the most notable acquisitions it made was for Crackle, the streaming service, which was a great move in 2021 when they did it. But this was right before the streaming bubble burst, so it was like kind of the worst time to do it. But then the biggest acquisition was this $375 million takeover of Redbox. Like the DVD, and I think some Blu-rays and some games too, but like the physical disc rental service. They took it over in 2022. These are like those kiosks outside of grocery stores and pharmacies and things like that. And in the 3 years since they acquired Crackle, the stock has gone from around $40 a share, $40, to less than 25 cents a share. I think now it's at like 19 cents. It's in danger of being delisted by the NASDAQ because it's so low. It's valued so low. Deadline notes that the Redbox acquisition was doomed from the start because by 2022 physical disc rentals had already been declining. And not only that, by buying Redbox, it came with about $325 million of debt, right? So clearly the company Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, or CSSE, clearly was struggling financially to the point where they weren't even able to make payroll and pay out medical benefits. So that was kind of the story. I kind of put a pin in it because no one else was really reporting on it except Deadline. And I was like, this seems interesting, but it doesn't seem like that big. No one else is talking about it. But then sure enough, over the weekend, on Saturday, CSSC, Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So what this means is secured creditors like banks are going to get paid out first, and then unsecured creditors like vendors will be next. It turns out the total debt of the company is $970 million. So almost $1 billion in debt. And per the filing, they have about 836 full-time employees and 197 part-time employees. So nearly 1,000 employees that they just weren't paying over like the past couple weeks. So this is like not a surprising turn of events, and it was really annoying because Redbox and Chicken Soup for the Soul were really puffing their feathers, talking about like, we're gonna completely innovate the entertainment industry, we're gonna be like a Disney level success company, and like everyone thought that was bullshit then, but I don't think anyone thought it would get this bad, right? And I find this story interesting because it just shows that change in the industry. You know, Redbox, when it was founded back in 2002, it seemed very well poised, right? This was like at the peak of like DVD sale. Like DVD had just become a thing by like the late 90s, early 2000s. But it steadily declined over the first decade of the 21st century, and it obviously continues to this day due to streaming, right? That streaming is just a more convenient option for most consumers who don't really care about like the quality differences. So I always found it surprising whenever I went to a supermarket or like go outside of a CVS or a Walgreens and to see a Redbox kiosk. And not only to do it, but to see people using it. Because it felt like a relic of a bygone era, right? I think one of the biggest flaws of Redbox is that even back like in 2006 when we first got one in our Stop and Shop in Rhode Island, is that it really only had like newer movies. It didn't have any older content. So that proved very disappointing even for me like as a kid when I was like 9 or 10. So it seemed very strange that they acquired Redbox, and I guess they had really high hopes to like be able to turn it around, but it didn't really seem like they had the vision for it. So it's definitely interesting to like I guess try to innovate and whatever, but it seemed like they didn't really have a plan to innovate. And who knows if Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment will even come out on alive on the other side of this the other side of this bankruptcy filing. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 5. So, A24, the very influential and prominent independent film distributor, has raised new funding. So, because notably it's a private company. It's not on the stock market. You can't like buy shares in this, right? So, this fundraising round was led by Josh Kushner's investment firm, Thrive Capital. If the last name sounds familiar, he is related to Jared Kushner, who is married to Ivanka Trump, right? So there's definitely that angle there. But Thrive Capital, this investment firm, is known for investing in companies like Instagram, like Spotify, like these pretty prominent, successful companies. And not only that, Josh Kushner is going to be joining A24's board of directors. This brings A24's valuation to about $3.5 billion, which itself is a 40% increase in value from the first fundraise back in 2022 when it received a $225 million investment. We have a statement here from A24 saying, quote, "We're thrilled to be working with Thrive Capital, whose unique expertise will be invaluable in our growth." And I'm adding this part, and they also gave us a shit ton of money. With Thrive, alongside our existing partners, we look forward to growing our support of groundbreaking storytellers and helping their voices reach audiences around the world, end quote. So again, what's the context of all this? So like I said, A24 is probably, like there have been more that have come about, like Neon and I think Annapurna Pictures, but A24 really is like the premier independent film distributor, kind of like a mini major or a major mini, if you will, right? And it's almost become synonymous with quality. That like if people see that A24 logo in front of a trailer, people lean in. It's not, and that's weird because not all their films are great or even good. But it's definitely it is a brand unto itself. That when people are just talking about independent films, that aren't made like in your backyard, people will be like, oh, it's like an A24 kind of film. right? Which is great brand. That's great if you run A24, that you have that brand power. But recently, you know, and the Wrap notes this in their article about this fundraising round, that, you know, A24 has been looking to level up, right? They've been looking to expand beyond art house cinema, leaning into more franchise work, which I remember at the time people bemoaned, right? Which I have mixed feelings about, because like that's going to be disappointing if they become lazy film franchises. But, you know, this upcoming year, in like a week, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, Maxine, the third film, and I guess the Pearl Maxine trilogy by T. West, you know, that's technically a franchise film now, if you think about it. So, you know, this is something that A24 has started to kind of moving into, right? They've been wanting to do this. And I think the big test for them, and I don't think it's a surprise that this is happening when this is happening, is because they just released a couple months ago their film Civil War by Alex Garland. And this was their most expensive film ever, but it was also one of the most successful. And it's made up over $120 million worldwide at the worldwide box office, right? So I think what's happened now, I think they've always been wanting to try to expand like this, but I think after Civil War, they had a taste for the money. And now they want some more, right? So like, what are the implications of this? So there's like a few possible futures that this could result in. So is this going to lead to the quote-unquote blockbusterification of A24? You know, where they kind of have the issue like the major Hollywood studios, where like back in the day, they had some small budget, they had some big budget, but it was mostly kind of this bell curve of mid-budget films. And then it kind of flipped, where movies were either $1 million, they only cost $1 million, or cost, you know, $250 million. Is that what's going to happen here with A24, where they just end up making less projects that each have a bigger budget? Which I think would be a shame, because I think they would lose what makes them special and what has garnered them the brand, not only recognition, but brand loyalty. Like, they have a merch shop, people wear A24 merch. Like, people who like this brand really, really like this brand. So it would be a shame if they decided we're going to just make less movies and just make more bigger budget, more marketable films. And I say this as someone who really actually quite liked Civil War. I thought it was one of the better, I think it's one of the best films of the year so far. Hot take. But that would be disappointing to see them limit the amount of movies they're making and just, or producing or distributing, and just put more money into each of them. That would be disappointing. But maybe on the flip side, the other extreme, maybe this is just more opportunities to make these small films. Again, you have more money. If you keep the budgets relatively the same, then you have more chances and opportunities for different filmmakers to come in and make interesting movies, right? But what's going to really happen is probably somewhere in the middle, right? Where there's going to be this mission creep, this slow creep into bigger budgets. And by bigger, we mean just compared to what they're doing now. So kind of really focusing more on that mid-range. Because again, Civil War was their most expensive movie, but let me confirm what the budget was for this. Like, it was their most expensive movie, but it was made for $50 million. That's not a lot of money when it comes to, like, blockbuster money. So, like, if they're just making more movies that are, like, in the $30 to $70 million range, I would be okay with that. I wouldn't be completely against it. Again, as long as, you know, they're able to maintain the quality that they've been able to have, and that's again the reason why they have such brand loyalty. I think this could work. I'm just waiting for it to go public so I can buy a share, which is not financial advice. Do not sue me if you invest everything in a hypothetical A24 stock and then you lose it all. Do not come crying to me. Okay, let me just grab a quick drink here. Let's just wrap up quick, looking ahead to this upcoming weekend. We have Despicable Me 4 coming out. And I'm projecting it's going to make about 60 to 66 million for the weekend. We're very interested to see if this is going to pull away any of Inside Out's money for this upcoming weekend. Because I wonder if just because it's an animated movie, do they really have the same audience? Because it's a different studio, it's a different kind of tone, different kind of movie. So, you know, the other ones, obviously the Despicable Me franchise, especially the Minions, has been gangbusters for Illumination and Universal, which owns Illumination. It'll just be interesting to see if people are sick and tired of it, or if this movie also does gangbusters. And then also, like I was mentioning, we have Maxine, MAXXX, like for porn, INE Maxine, coming out this week. I'm predicting it's going to make just a humble amount of 6 to 8 million. Again, it's not, the other ones didn't open super big. That was also still like very much in the throes of, I think, like the very end, the tail end of the pandemic. But I'm not expecting this to do huge numbers either. But I've been hearing pretty good reviews about it. And people love those first two movies. So this could be like a little sleeper hit for A24, right? Okay, so that basically wraps up the show. Just want to give a few quick plugs here. I have another YouTube channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film and media entertainment in a more video essay format. The video that I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at Frozen and kind of look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these two like older and younger version of myself to like explore that. So definitely go check that out and go subscribe. It really would be a huge help. You can find the link in the description below. Also want to give a plug to a podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right now we're doing the Addams Family franchise, not this Friday, but this Friday we're going to be releasing our kind of franchise retrospective about the Addams Family, which is what we've been covering this season. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to listen to podcasts. You can also go find us in the link in the description below. And again, I just want to plug, like I did earlier in the show, Cinema Incuso is not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I write more formal written reviews of new films coming out. My most recent review, Inside Out 2, is up and running, so if you want to go check that out, that really would be a huge help. You can find the link in the description below, or you can just go to your browser and type in cinemaincuso.substack.com. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really does help with the metrics. And please, 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 if you're watching this, subscribe. We're trying to build a little community here, the little Cinema Incuso community. We would love to have you. But until next time, I'll see you all next week, Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Peace out.